Sydney's cold morning air greeted Mara Navarro the moment she stepped out of the airport, brushing past her cheeks like a quiet promise. She tightened her grip on Jex's arm, hoping the city's freshness would dissolve the stubborn heaviness left over from the wedding weeks before. Everyone said a honeymoon could fix everything: distance, doubts, even unspoken hurt. Mara desperately wanted to believe that. She wanted this trip to be the reset button they both needed. Jex slid his sunglasses on and flashed that playful grin she used to adore. "First day of our new life. Ready, Mrs. Navarro?" She forced a laugh. "I've been ready since Manila." But even as she said it, Mara caught something strange in his tone, something rehearsed, like a man playing a role he wasn't sure he remembered. Their taxi weaved through the morning traffic, past the iconic skyline and glistening harbor. Mara pressed her forehead against the window, admiring how the sunlight sparkled off the water. Sydney felt large and alive, the complete opposite of the suffocating chaos of their wedding preparations. Here, nobody knew them. Nobody expected perfection from them. It was supposed to be freedom. Yet Jex remained unnervingly quiet beside her. At the hotel, a luxurious suite overlooking Darling Harbor awaited them. Mara ran her fingers across the polished counter, inhaled the faint lavender scent the staff had carefully sprayed, and allowed herself to exhale. Finally, Jex wandered around the room with a strange detachment, checking his phone repeatedly, responding to messages she couldn't see. "You okay?" she asked lightly. "Yeah. Just work stuff," he muttered. She frowned. "You told me you turned everything off for the trip." He paused, only for a second, but Mara saw his jaw tighten before he forced another grin. "I did. Just clearing a few old notifications. Don't start worrying. We're here to chill, right?" She nodded, though a small knot formed in her chest. It wasn't the first time he brushed off her curiosity. Lately, it felt like he kept miles of distance hidden behind a few inches of proximity. By afternoon, they strolled through Darling Harbor, hand in hand. Mara leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, inhaling the familiar scent of his perfume. She remembered why she fought so hard for them, why she ignored the arguments during the wedding planning, the abrupt mood shifts, the unexplained errands. Love, she told herself, always had rough edges. But Jex seemed distracted, constantly glancing over his shoulder. At one point, he stepped aside to take a call. Mara heard only fragments, a hushed voice, a tense whisper. "I said not now. You know why? Stop calling." When Jex returned, he pretended nothing happened, speaking to her with the same bright tone, but his eyes avoided hers. They continued walking, but the air between them had shifted, carrying something colder than the Sydney breeze. Later, back in the suite, Mara sat by the window, watching boats glide across the darkening water. Jex showered, the sound of running water echoing through the room. She closed her eyes, trying to erase the unease blooming inside her. She wanted this city to heal them. She wanted this honeymoon to be the beginning of something stronger. But behind every smile Jex offered lay a shadow she couldn't reach. And shadows, Mara knew, didn't follow people, they followed secrets. As the first night settled over Sydney, Mara whispered to herself, "Tomorrow will be better." But deep inside, she felt the first quiet crack in the perfect escape they had hoped to build. Tomorrow would bring the cold wind, and the warm lies behind it. Morning sunlight spilled into the hotel suite, soft and golden, but it did nothing to quiet the unease that curled in Mara's stomach. She woke to an empty bed, Jex's side cold, his pillow untouched. The city outside buzzed with the beginning of a new day, but the silence inside the room felt heavier than the night before. She checked the clock. 6:42 a.m. Too early for Jex to be out. Too early for him to be anywhere without telling her. Mara wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and stepped onto the balcony. The cold air bit at her skin. From the 12th floor, Sydney looked peaceful, water shimmering, boats drifting, people already beginning their routines. She wanted to feel part of that peace. Instead, every passing minute added to her worry. When Jex finally returned, he swung the door open with exaggerated cheerfulness. "You're awake. Good morning." He kissed her forehead quickly, too quickly, like a man trying to erase a question before it formed. Where were you? Mara asked softly. Just walked around. Couldn't sleep. Jet lag. He shrugged, avoiding her eyes as he tossed a plastic bag onto the table. Got breakfast. Your favorite. She looked inside, almond croissants, the same ones she always bought back home. Her heart softened for a second. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe this was still their honeymoon, and she should stop looking for ghosts in everything he did. But then his phone vibrated. Jex grabbed it instantly, shielding the screen with his hand. Mara caught only a glimpse, unknown number. Work stuff again? She asked, trying to keep her voice even. He forced a laugh. Bip stuff. It's nothing. Just some people bothering me. Who? No one important. His answer came too fast, too firm. Something inside Mara chilled. She didn't push further, but her silence spoke louder than any argument could. Jex noticed, a flicker of irritation crossing his face before he hid it behind another smile. They spent the afternoon exploring the rocks, walking among the old stone walls and craft markets. The wind grew colder, tugging at her coat. Jex walked ahead, his steps quick and restless. Every few minutes, his phone buzzed again. He stepped aside to answer in hushed tones. Mara pretended to look at handmade jewelry while eavesdropping on fragments that floated over the wind. I told you not today. No, she doesn't know. Stop calling me. Each sentence sliced through her chest. When he returned, Mara confronted him quietly. Jex, who keeps calling you? He scoffed. You're really doing this now? On our honeymoon? I just want the truth. The truth is you're being dramatic, he snapped. Relax. Enjoy the trip. She swallowed the sting of his words. He didn't apologize. He just walked ahead, leaving her to hurry behind him like a stranger trying to catch up. By evening, they visited a waterfront restaurant. Candlelight flickered between them. Jex looked distracted, tapping his fingers on the table, glancing at the door as if expecting someone. When Mara reached for his hand, he flinched before forcing a smile. I'm just tired, okay? Don't make a big deal out of it. Her voice trembled. Are you hiding something? Jex leaned back, the warmth draining from his expression. You're imagining things. But Mara saw it, the fear in his eyes. Not fear of losing her, but fear of something else entirely. Later, as they walked back to the hotel, a hotel staff member stopped Jex politely. Sir, welcome again. Everything all right this time? Jex stiffened. This time? The staff smiled. When you checked in earlier this week? Jex quickly cut him off with a tight laugh. Thank you. Mara froze. Earlier this week? He had arrived, before their honeymoon? She turned to Jex slowly, the cold wind whipping her hair around her face. Jex, she whispered, why were you here before me? His answer never came. Because behind them, in the crowd, a flash of red fabric flickered, vanishing just as fast. A woman. Watching. Mara froze on the sidewalk, the night wind cutting through her coat as the last flicker of red disappeared behind a passing crowd. For a moment, she wondered if exhaustion was playing tricks on her. But the hotel staff's words echoed too loudly in her mind. When you checked in earlier this week. Something wasn't right. Something had never been right, she realized, even before their wedding. But now the truth felt much closer, like a shadow stepping out of the dark and breathing against her neck. Jex tugged her arm sharply. Let's go, he muttered, eyes darting around. Who was she? Mara whispered. He didn't look at her. Who? The woman in the red coat. I saw her watching us. Jex huffed, annoyed rather than alarmed. Mara, stop it. You're imagining things again. He said it like it was a habit she couldn't break, like she was the unstable one. But Mara knew what she saw. The woman wasn't just looking, she was observing, eyes fixed on Jex with a familiarity that made Mara's stomach twist. Back inside the hotel, Jex became uncharacteristically attentive, showering her with forced affection, trying too hard to erase questions he had no intention of answering. He massaged her shoulders, offered room service, suggested a movie, anything to distract her mind from circling back to the truth. But the truth didn't disappear. It hardened. While Jex showered, Mara stepped onto the balcony again. The night lights scattered across the harbor like shattered glass. She hugged herself, feeling a strange tremble that wasn't from the cold. She tried to replay the night, searching for an innocent explanation, but each thread tightened into the same conclusion. Jex was hiding something big, and the woman in red was part of it. When the bathroom door opened, Mara turned. Jex emerged in a towel, steam trailing after him. He flashed a smile, the practiced kind that never reached his eyes. "You okay now?" he asked. She studied him. "Why were you in Sydney before me?" His expression didn't crack, but it stilled, just for a beat, like a mask slipping before he pressed it back on. "I came early to prepare the room," he said casually. "Wanted the honeymoon to be perfect." Mara stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it was a surprise," he insisted. His tone was warm, but his eyes glimmered with irritation, the kind he used when he felt cornered. Mara didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind kept circling back to the woman. Her red coat, the way she lingered, the way Jex stiffened the moment the staff mentioned his earlier arrival. Everything screamed contradiction. And the cold winds outside seemed to carry a warning she couldn't ignore. Later, when Jex fell asleep, Mara reached for his phone on the nightstand. Her fingers trembled. She wasn't the type who liked searching through someone's private world. But tonight wasn't about trust, it was about survival of the heart. And perhaps more. Before she could unlock it, the screen lit up on its own. "Unknown number, are you with her?" "Unknown number, you promised we'd talk tonight." Mara's breath hitched. Her pulse hammered. She stared at the glowing words, her world narrowing into a tight, suffocating ring of fear and truth. The woman in red wasn't a hallucination. She was real. She was contacting him. And Jex was hiding her. Mara slipped the phone back silently. She lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, feeling every beat of her heart grow heavier. She knew she needed answers. Not guesses, not theories, but real truth. The kind people try to bury under lies. As dawn approached, Mara made a decision. She would follow Jex tomorrow, wherever he went. She would find the woman in red. And she would uncover whatever secret had traveled with them to Sydney, long before she had. Because shadows, she realized, were only temporary. But secrets eventually stepped into the light. Mara barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, the messages on Jex's phone flashed in the darkness. "Are you with her?" "And you promised we'd talk tonight." By sunrise, exhaustion clung to her, but determination held her upright. If Jex had a secret life, she was done tiptoeing around it. She would unearth it, piece by painful piece. Jex woke before her, slipping out of bed quietly, unaware she was already watching. He moved with an anxious energy, checking his phone, pocketing it instantly, pacing near the balcony door as though waiting for a signal only he could hear. "I'm going for coffee," he announced suddenly. "You want anything?" Mara held his gaze. "I'll come with you." He hesitated, a tiny pause, but enough to confirm what she feared. He didn't want her beside him. "Actually," he said lightly, "I want to walk alone. Clear my head." Her heart tightened. "Clear your head of what?" He forced a smile. "You're reading into things again. I'll be back soon." He left before she could question further, letting the door shut like a wall between them. The moment he was gone, Mara stood up, her breath shallow. She knew she didn't have much time. She had watched him long enough to memorize his patterns. He always forgot one thing when in a hurry. His tablet. She found it on the bedside table, screen smudged with fingerprints. She didn't need the passcode. They had set the same one years ago, back when trust felt effortless. The device unlocked. Her throat tightened as she opened his messaging app. Dozens of conversations, most harmless. But one thread, marked only with a single red heart, pulled her gaze like a magnet. She tapped it. The thread was filled with long messages he never deleted. Words filled with intimacy. Lucid promises. Plans. Plans that made her stomach flip. "I'll meet you the moment she sleeps. Don't worry, she won't know anything. Give me time. The honeymoon is just a formality." Mara covered her mouth, feeling her world tilt. These messages weren't recent. They dated back months, even during their wedding preparations. She scrolled further, breath trembling. You know I still love you. Once we're in Sydney, it'll be easier. Trust me, Leah. Leah. The woman in red had a name now. A name that stabbed deeper than any message could. Mara blinked hard, trying to steady herself as tears threatened. She clicked on a photo Leah had sent, only to see a familiar view behind her. A building she had walked past just yesterday. A balcony overlooking the harbor from a low-rise apartment complex. Leah was here. In Sydney. Close. Too close. Just then, a new message popped onto the screen, making Mara jump. Leah. Did you tell her? We can't keep hiding. Mara's hands went cold. Another message followed immediately. Leah. Jex, I saw you last night. Why was she with you? Her mind reeled. Saw you last night. So the woman in red had indeed been watching them. She wasn't some distant affair. She was here, physically lingering near them, waiting for Jex. Waiting for the truth they both hid. Mara clutched the tablet, breaths shallow, heart pounding so loudly she felt it echo in her spine. She needed answers. Not tomorrow, not later. She checked the timestamp. Jex had been gone only 15 minutes. If she hurried, she could follow him. She could find where he was meeting Leah. She grabbed her coat and slipped out of the suite, adrenaline overriding fear. The hallway stretched long and silent, but Mara's footsteps were quick and purposeful. She wouldn't confront him yet. Not until she understood the full truth behind the messages, the calls, the lies. All she needed was to find that apartment balcony, the one she saw in Leah's photo. Because somewhere in Sydney, the woman in red was waiting. And Mara was done being kept in the dark. Mara hurried down the busy Sydney street, her pulse thundering in her ears. The city around her buzzed with normalcy, people in suits, mothers with strollers, tourists with cameras, yet she felt like she was drifting through another world entirely. Leah's photo remained sharp in her memory, the balcony's iron railing, the slanted angle of the harbor behind it, the cluster of identical apartment blocks. She scanned every building she passed, searching for the view that matched. It didn't take long. A row of mid-rise apartments appeared across from a narrow cafe, each with small balconies facing the water. One of them, second from the corner, had the exact railing design she recognized. Her heart seized. Leah was inside one of those rooms. Jex had been there before her. Mara swallowed hard and crossed the street. Her legs felt unsteady, but the anger beneath her fear pushed her forward. The entrance of the building smelled faintly of detergent and sea breeze. She stepped inside, staring at the list of tenants by the mailboxes. No names she recognized. But she didn't need names, not when her instincts were screaming she was in the right place. She pressed the elevator button. The doors opened instantly, almost as if the building itself expected her. Inside, she took the lift to the 3rd floor, the same floor level she estimated from the photo's angle. When the doors slid open, the hallway stretched ahead, lined with identical white doors. Her breath quickened. Then she heard it, a muffled voice behind one of the doors, calm but tense. A woman's voice. Leah. Mara stepped closer, her palm hovering over the doorknob. Before she could second-guess herself, the door swung open from inside. A woman stood there, stunned. Red coat draped over a chair behind her. Dark hair tied loosely. Eyes sharp, wary, and then widening with recognition. You're her, the woman whispered. You're Mara. Mara's throat tightened. And you're Leah. Silence wrapped around them like smoke. Leah stepped aside slowly, her expression shifting between guilt and defiance. You should come in. Mara entered without a word. The apartment was small, neat, lived in. A coffee mug sat on the table beside an open laptop. A scarf hung on the back of the couch. None of it looked temporary. Leah wasn't hiding here. She belonged here. Where is he? Mara asked, voice trembling but resolute. Leah's shoulders slumped. Not here. Not yet. Yet. Mara echoed sharply. Leah sank onto the couch, rubbing her forehead. He said he'd come after getting coffee. He promised we'd talk before you found out. The bitterness in Leah's voice was unmistakable. Not triumph. Not victory. Mara remained standing, fingers digging into her palms. How long have you two? Years, Leah whispered. On and off. We were together long before he met you. The words struck like a physical blow. Mara's breath hitched, but she refused to sit, refused to let the pain fold her in half. Leah continued, voice thickening. He said things with you were temporary. That your marriage was complicated. That he needed time. Mara's eyes burned. He married me. He vowed to love me. He brought me on a honeymoon. He told me he needed the honeymoon, Leah said quietly. That everything would be easier after. Easier? Mara's stomach twisted with nausea. Leah watched her with eyes that held their own suffering. I didn't know he still planned to be with me until last night. When I saw you two together, I realized he'd lied to both of us. The apartment door rattled suddenly, keys fumbling on the other side. Mara's pulse exploded. Leah stiffened, eyes widening. The door swung open, and Jex froze, stunned to find them together. His face drained of color, then flushed with fury. Mara, he breathed, what are you doing here? She stared at him, every betrayal, every lie crashing down in a single, suffocating moment. Leah rose slowly, standing beside Mara, united by the same bruise left by the same man. Jex stepped in, shutting the door behind him, voice dropping into something low and dangerous. You shouldn't have come here. The hallway outside Adrian's secret apartment still felt like it pulsed beneath Clara's feet as she left, the echo of what she had seen, what she now knew, thrumming in her bones. By the time she reached her car, the fury that had first erupted in her no longer burned clean. It twisted, darkened, took on a feral shape she barely recognized. Love, she told herself, was not supposed to mutate into something so sharp, but betrayal did strange things to the heart, reshaping even gentle impulses. Clara drove without direction, her fingers rigid around the wheel. She didn't remember starting the engine or pulling onto the street. All she remembered was Adrian's voice, the rehearsed calm of someone who had been lying for so long he no longer remembered truth. The fact that he could build an entire hidden life, an apartment, a woman, a story, while still kissing her goodnight burrowed under her skin like a parasite, feeding on every memory she once trusted. She parked near the waterfront, where waves crashed in steady, indifferent rhythm. The wind iced her cheeks, but the cold gave her clarity. She replayed the past weeks, the late-night drives, the missed calls, his sudden bursts of tenderness followed by inexplicable distance. It all made sense now, but in a way that deepened the wound. This wasn't just infidelity. It was choreography, deliberate and precise, crafted with unsettling confidence. She stared out at the water and felt something inside her break, but instead of shattering, it rearranged itself. There was grief, yes, but beneath it lay a new instinct, raw and sharp. She needed answers. Not the soft, half-truth ones he fed her. Real ones. And she sensed Adrian would not give them willingly, not when he had built so much on deception and denial. By the time the first stars appeared, Clara had formed a plan, not a full one, but the skeleton of something she could shape. She would confront him, but not in the way he expected. Confrontation required equal footing, and she no longer believed she stood on the same ground. She needed to watch, to wait, to see who he became when he thought he was unobserved, because only then would the real contours of his lies reveal themselves. When she arrived home, the house sat quiet. Adrian's car wasn't in the driveway. For once, Clara was grateful. She moved through the rooms slowly, noticing details she had overlooked. The faint scent of cologne that didn't match his, the shirts he claimed he had worn to late meetings that were still perfectly pressed, the subtle tension in the air, as though the house recoiled from the weight of secrets it held. Clara sat on the edge of the bed they had shared for nearly 2 decades. She opened her phone and scrolled through her messages, each one marked unread. Each one a reminder of the distance he had been cultivating. She typed a new message, then deleted it. She no longer wanted explanations in text. She wanted his face when he tried to speak them, wanted to see the flicker of truth or the collapse of another lie. She lay back, listening to the ticking clock. The night stretched, taut and breathless. When she finally heard the front door open, her pulse quickened, but not with fear. With certainty. Something irreversible hovered in the air between them, waiting to take shape. Adrian had no idea that the woman waiting in the dark was no longer the Clara he had left in silence. She had changed, quietly, dangerously, and the next chapter of their unraveling was about to begin now. Adrian paused in the hallway, sensing something off the moment he stepped inside. The air felt heavy, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Clara remained seated in the darkened bedroom, listening to his cautious footsteps draw closer. Her heart thudded, not from fear, but from a strange, sharpened calm that hadn't existed in her before tonight. When he entered the room, she didn't speak. The shadowed outline of her body made him hesitate. "Clara," he murmured. She finally looked up. "We need to talk." He exhaled heavily, clearly exhausted, clearly rehearsing some new excuse. For a second she almost pitied him. Almost. But the memory of the secret apartment, the woman in red, the proof of his double life, flashed before her eyes, hardening her resolve. "I know," Adrian said, rubbing his temples. "I've been distant. Work has been—" "Stop," Clara cut in. The single word struck like a blade. "No more lies." His jaw tightened, the barest flicker of panic visible. She watched him carefully, analyzing each micro-expression. This, she realized, was the real man, cornered, unmasked, scrambling for a believable story. "I found the apartment," she said. Adrian's breath stopped. He didn't ask which apartment. He didn't pretend not to understand. His silence was confirmation enough. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then he stepped back, not in fear of her, but in fear of what his admission would demand. "Clara, you weren't supposed to." "You don't get to decide what I'm supposed to know," she said quietly. His expression shifted, something darker flickering through his eyes. A warning. A tension that hadn't existed between them before this night. Clara stood slowly. "We're going to the harbor." Adrian blinked. "Why?" "Because you owe me the truth," she said. "All of it. And you won't give it to me in this house where you've buried enough secrets already." He hesitated, then nodded. Maybe he believed he could still control the narrative. Maybe he believed she wasn't as broken or dangerous as she felt. Either way, he agreed, grabbing his keys with trembling fingers. They drove in brittle silence, the kind that made the air feel electrified. The waterfront was nearly empty when they arrived, the moon glinting off black water, waves slapping the wooden docks. Clara stepped out first, the wind whipping her hair across her face. Adrian followed more slowly. "Tell me," she said, not looking at him. "Tell me who she is." "She doesn't matter," he insisted. "It wasn't, Clara, it wasn't what you think." She let out a low, humorless laugh. "You're standing on a pier at midnight trying to tell me your second apartment and your second life don't matter?" His shoulders slumped. "I made mistakes." "Mistakes don't require rent payments," she snapped. "Mistakes don't wear red dresses and wait for you." He flinched, and for the first time, she saw something like remorse flicker across his face. But remorse wasn't enough, not anymore. "Clara," he said softly, "I never stopped loving you." The words were meant to soothe her, but instead they ignited something primal. This wasn't love. Love didn't hide in locked rooms and whispered messages. Love didn't lie for sport. Clara stepped closer, her voice low. "You don't get to use that word with me. Not after all this." The wind groaned against the metal railings. A gull shrieked overhead. The entire harbor felt on edge, as though sensing what was coming. Adrian reached for her arm. "Please. Let's just go home and talk." She jerked away instinctively. His balance slipped, just slightly, but enough to send a ripple of panic through both of them. He steadied himself against the dock piling, breathing hard. Clara watched the movement, something hollow opening in her chest. Not fear. Not guilt. Just inevitability. Adrian swallowed. "Clara, what are you going to do?" She didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because naming it would make it real too soon. Behind them, a boat engine rumbled to life somewhere in the dark, its glow cutting faintly across the water. And in that moment, Clara knew the night wasn't finished. Not yet. What came next would change everything. and there would be no turning back. The boat's engine hummed distantly as Clara and Adrian stood frozen on the dock, their silhouettes carved sharply against the dark, restless harbor. It was the moment after the moment. The second when everything felt suspended, waiting for one of them to breathe wrong, move wrong, speak wrong. The tension from the pier confrontation still pulsed in the air like a bruise that refused to settle. Clara stepped back from Adrian, not out of fear but clarity. The cold wind stung her cheeks, grounding her, sharpening every thought that had once been blurred by love and denial. She saw him now, not her husband, not her partner, but a man whose entire existence had been built on secret compartments and controlled narratives. The honeymoon had ended long before Sydney. She just hadn't noticed. Adrian inhaled shakily, the harbor lights catching the fear he tried to bury. Claire, let's not do this. Not here. We're tired. We're both emotional. You're emotional because you got caught, she replied. I'm emotional because I was stupid enough to believe you. He winced, looking toward the water as though the waves might offer him an escape route. You think everything was a lie? Wasn't it? She shot back. The second apartment. The bookings under a different name. The woman in red. Your late-night absences. Your secret messages. Tell me which part was real, if you can. For a long moment, Adrian said nothing. Then a small, resigned sigh escaped him. Clara, I didn't plan for you to find out here. That's your defense? No, he looked down at his shoes. It's the truth. His honesty, if it even was honesty, didn't soften her. It only made everything heavier, more suffocating. A cold, heavy certainty settled in her spine. She had crossed a threshold tonight, and there was no path back to the naive woman she had been when their plane touched down. Clara turned toward the edge of the dock. The waves slapped angrily against the posts, the sound rhythmic, almost taunting. Do you know what hurts the most? She asked quietly. Adrian shook his head. You didn't even give me a chance to be angry or hurt before you replaced me, she whispered. You just stepped out of our marriage like it was a shirt you didn't want anymore. He stepped closer, voice strained. I didn't replace you. That's the thing, Adrian, she murmured. You did. And you replaced yourself too. You became someone I don't recognize. The boat from earlier drifted slightly closer to shore, its lights dimming as the captain slowed. It cast long shadows across the dock, swallowing parts of them into moving darkness. Adrian seemed distracted by it, glancing frequently over his shoulder as though someone might be listening. She didn't miss the gesture. Clara followed his gaze. Expecting someone? She asked sharply. No, of course not. But his voice cracked just slightly. Clara's heart clenched. A new thought bloomed, dangerous, poisonous, undeniable. He wasn't just hiding infidelity. He was hiding involvement. Adrian, she said slowly, who else is part of this? He stiffened. No one. Don't lie. His hands curled into fists. Clara, stop. You're letting your imagination run wild. Am I? She replied. Does imagination pay rent on apartments under your alias? Does imagination text you at 2 a.m. with, you said you'd come? Does imagination make you check behind you every 10 seconds? He swallowed, throat bobbing. Something snapped inside her, quietly, cleanly. The honeymoon, the romance, the dream, they were corpses now. And she refused to bury them quietly. Tell me the truth, she demanded. Adrian's breathing quickened. I can't. Why not? It will change everything. Her voice hardened. Everything's already changed. Another gust of wind slammed the waves harder against the dock. The boat lights flickered. A gull screeched overhead. Sydney's night seemed to tighten like a fist. Adrian looked at her, really looked at her. At the woman he had underestimated, dismissed, lied to. He opened his mouth to speak. But a phone buzzed. Clara froze. Adrian's eyes widened in dread. The message preview glowed on the screen. We see you. Don't make this worse. Clara felt the world tilt. And she understood. The tragedy that would define their honeymoon had only just begun. The message on Adrian's phone vibrated between them like a pulse from another world. Clara stared at the glowing screen, her stomach twisting, her breath quickening. "We see you. Don't make this worse." The words slithered under her skin, cold and predatory. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was danger, real, immediate, closing in. Adrian snatched the phone from her hand. "Claire, don't." "Who sent that?" she demanded. "No one you need to worry about." "That's not an answer." Her voice rose, tight with fear and fury. "It's complicated," he muttered. "Everything is complicated when you're lying." He stepped back from her, eyes scanning the harbor. His nervousness wasn't theatrical anymore. It was instinctive, survival-driven. Clara felt the shift like a temperature drop. Adrian was afraid, not of losing her, but of whatever, or whoever, was watching. The boat in the distance cut its engine. Silence swallowed the dock. Then came footsteps. So, measured, deliberate. Someone was approaching from the far end of the pier. Clara's blood froze. Adrian tensed, jaw locking. "Stay behind me," he whispered. The figure moved into the faint wash of moonlight. A silhouette, tall, hooded, gliding with a confidence that made Clara's skin prickle. She couldn't see a face, but she felt the eyes. Watching. Studying. Deciding. Adrian stepped forward, voice low. "You weren't supposed to come." The stranger didn't answer. Clara's pulse thudded painfully. She had walked into a world she didn't understand, but she knew enough to recognize the threat. The entire harbor felt narrower, like the shadows were pressing them toward the water. "What do you want?" Clara forced out. Still no answer. Instead, the stranger's hands slipped into their jacket. Clara's breath hitched. Adrian moved, fast, stepping between her and the shadow. "Stop. Don't do this." A metallic glint caught the moonlight. A blade. Not long. Not theatrical. Efficient. Clara's knees weakened. Adrian lifted his hands, palms outward. "This wasn't the plan. I said I'd handle it." The stranger finally spoke, voice low and sharp. "You lost control the moment she found the apartment." Clara felt the words cut deeper than the knife ever could. She looked at Adrian, horrified. "You told them about me?" Adrian didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was written in the stranger's cold posture, their confidence, their familiarity with Adrian. They were connected, bound by something darker than an affair. Clara's betrayal expanded into something bigger, heavier, more lethal. The stranger stepped closer. The blade lifted slightly. Adrian whispered, "Clara, run." She didn't move. Couldn't move. The stranger lunged. Adrian shoved Clara aside and the impact of bodies colliding echoed across the dock. The blade flashed between them in violent, desperate arcs. Clara scrambled back, her palms scraping against the rough wood as she watched the two figures struggle in a blur of frantic motion. "Adrian," she screamed. He grunted, trying to overpower the attacker, but he was losing ground. The stranger's precision was terrifying, controlled, practiced. Clara looked around wildly for something, anything. A rope cleat. A broken bottle. A loose plank. Her trembling hand closed around a metal fishing gaff left by the pier railing. She surged forward. But the stranger saw her coming. A swift kick sent her sprawling, the gaff clattering away across the boards. The attacker turned back to Adrian just as he tried to stand. A knee to his ribs sent him collapsing. The blade lifted again. Clara let out a raw, desperate cry. "Stop, please." The stranger paused. Not from mercy, but calculation. "Take him," the voice said coldly. "Or take her." Adrian wheezed, clutching his side. "Clara, go." The stranger's head snapped toward her. Decision made. Clara felt the moment break open. This night, already drowning in secrets, had just demanded blood. And the knives were far from finished. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and tension, a mixture Clara had never known until now. The fluorescent lights reflected harshly on the faces of strangers who watched her with curiosity, judgment, and morbid interest. She sat rigid in her seat, the weight of the past weeks pressing down, a heavy fog she could neither shake nor ignore. Adrian's absence was obvious. He had been remanded in custody, but the room still felt charged by his shadow, lingering like smoke in every corner. The trial had begun with procedural monotony, lawyers reading statements, witnesses taking seats, the low hum of whispered questions. But as the prosecutor laid out the timeline, Clara felt every lie, every secret apartment, every clandestine text, sharpened and magnified. Each revelation was a scalpel against her memory of love and trust, dissecting it, leaving only fragments of truth. On the night of the harbor incident, the prosecutor's voice rang. The defendant was seen meeting a third party, armed and prepared for confrontation. Witnesses describe a struggle involving knives, a woman endangered, and the defendant's attempt to conceal evidence. Surveillance confirms the events align with the testimony. Clara's throat went dry. Every word echoed, replaying the horror of that night, the cold wind, the metallic glint, the sense of inevitability that had settled over the dock like a final sentence. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She had seen it all. She had lived it. Now it was catalogued, narrated, and being judged in front of everyone. The defense attorney's cross-examination tried to paint Adrian as misunderstood, as a man cornered by circumstance. But each statement fell flat against the weight of corroborated evidence. Clara noted how Adrian's meticulous network of lies unraveled under scrutiny, revealing him not as a clever manipulator but as a man unable to resist his own compulsions, blind to the destruction trailing behind him. Her own testimony was next. Clara rose, trembling at first, gripping the edge of the witness stand. Her voice shook. "I trusted him. I believed him. I thought we were going on a honeymoon that we could start fresh, but he hid things. Not just from me, but from everyone. And the night at the harbor, it wasn't just fear. It was survival. I didn't know if we would live." The judge's gavel punctuated her words, a reminder that this was now public. Her personal pain had become evidence, a weapon against deception. She met Adrian's eyes across the courtroom. His expression was carefully neutral, but the flicker of fear she had seen on the dock returned, fleeting but undeniable. One by one, the witnesses spoke, the hotel staff who noticed the second check-in, the neighbors who saw a woman in red waiting, and the forensic team documenting the knive's trajectory and blood patterns. The web of lies, carefully spun by Adrian, was being dismantled, strand by strand, in front of her. As the final witness exited, the courtroom settled into a tense quiet. Clara exhaled slowly, realizing she felt something she hadn't expected. Not relief, not joy, but a bitter clarity. The truth was out. Adrian could no longer hide, manipulate, or twist the story to his advantage. The trial had turned private horrors into a public reckoning, and she had survived. Yet, even as the gavel called the day to recess, she understood that truth, once revealed, demanded a price. The upcoming verdict would not only determine Adrian's fate but mark the irrevocable end of the life she had once imagined. The honeymoon, the lies, the knives, they had all led here. And nothing would ever be the same. Clara's fingers rested lightly on the edge of the witness stand. She looked toward the empty chair where Adrian had sat before, feeling the weight of everything carried between them. Justice was no longer abstract. It was immediate, palpable, and the trial of their lives was far from over. The courtroom was unnervingly still, the kind of silence that presses against the ears and forces every heartbeat into awareness. Clara sat upright, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white against the fabric of her coat. The trial that had consumed weeks of her life, the nights haunted by red coats, hidden apartments, and the harbor struggle, had come down to this final moment. The judge's face, solemn and unreadable, bore into the assembled crowd like a final, impartial eye. Adrian sat across from her, restrained by handcuffs, every line of his body tense. His usual composure had dissolved in the last days of testimony. The careful veneer of charm had cracked, leaving a man exposed in the harsh glare of truth. Clara's pulse throbbed in her throat as the judge began to speak. Having considered the evidence, testimony, and circumstances presented, the judge intoned, voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room, "The court reaches a verdict." Clara held her breath, the weight of months pressing down on her shoulders. Every memory of Sydney, the cold winds along the harbor, the metallic flash of knives, the secret apartment, the messages she had discovered, flashed like a reel in her mind. It all led here, to this room, to this verdict. Adrian's lawyer shifted in his seat, fingers drumming nervously. Adrian himself kept his gaze fixed on the table, jaw tight, as if willing the words to change, to spare him the consequences that had been inevitable from the first moment his lies and deceptions had been exposed. On the charges of conspiracy, attempted assault, and endangerment, the judge continued, the court finds the defendant guilty. The words struck like a hammer. Clara felt her knees weaken but remained seated, rigid with a strange mix of vindication and lingering disbelief. She had wanted justice, craved it even, but the reality of hearing it, seeing it pronounced, was more surreal than she had imagined. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Adrian's face paled, and he glanced around as if searching for someone to protest the inevitability. None came. Even his own lawyer's lips pressed into a thin line of resignation. The judge paused, letting the weight of the verdict settle over everyone. Sentencing will follow in due course. The court recognizes the extraordinary circumstances, including the premeditated concealment of activities and the risk posed to an innocent party, in this case, the victim, Ms. Clara Reynolds. Clara exhaled slowly, the tension that had gripped her for weeks loosening for the first time. Relief mixed with the bitter taste of what she had endured, betrayal, fear, and the sheer terror of standing on a dock while knives flashed in the moonlight. But the verdict also brought clarity. She was no longer trapped in his lies. She had survived, and the law had acknowledged that survival. Adrian's shoulders sagged under the weight of the chains and the verdict. For the first time, Clara realized that his life, meticulously compartmentalized and built on manipulation, was now irrevocably fractured. The careful control he had exerted over her, over Leah, over everything, had crumbled. As the gavel banged, signaling the close of proceedings, Clara felt a strange stillness descend. She looked around the courtroom, taking in the faces of spectators, lawyers, and officials. The city outside, the harbor, the streets of Sydney she had once wandered with hope, now seemed to shimmer with quiet resolution. Clara rose, stepping out into the sunlight streaming through the high windows. The city smelled faintly of salt and rain, carrying a calm that contrasted sharply with the storm of the past weeks. She realized, as she drew a slow breath, that the honeymoon, the lies, the knives, the messages, and the hidden apartments, all of it, had led to this final reckoning. And as Sydney's verdict etched itself into the record, she understood the truth she had fought for, that even after the darkest nights, justice could finally pierce through the shadows. Clara stepped forward, leaving the courtroom behind. The next chapter of her life awaited, and this time, it would be hers to write. Clara walked along the Sydney waterfront alone, the early morning sun casting long, pale shadows across the empty docks. The city was alive with its usual rhythm, but for her, the streets were hollow, haunted by the echoes of the past weeks. The harbor, once a place of romance and promise, now felt like a mausoleum of broken vows and vanished trust. Each wave that lapped against the pilings whispered fragments of the memories she could never erase. The verdict had been delivered. Adrian was gone, confined behind bars for the crimes he had meticulously hidden. The legal reckoning had been swift, precise, and thorough. But justice, Clara realized, did not erase the scars. It did not bring back the nights of fear, the metallic taste of terror on the dock, or the feeling of helplessness as knives glinted under the moonlight. Those moments remained vivid, imprinted in her mind as ghostly reminders of what she had survived. She paused at the edge of the pier, looking down at the water that had once seemed endless in possibility. The reflections shimmered, fractured, like the illusions Adrian had built around her life. She closed her eyes, trying to remember the honeymoon she had imagined, the soft laughter, the champagne toasts, the joy of discovery, but it was over, irretrievably replaced by fear and betrayal. The honeymoon had never been hers. It had belonged to the lies he carried with him, a trip orchestrated to mask the reality beneath. A cold wind swept across the harbor, ruffling her hair and brushing against her skin. Clara shivered, not from the temperature, but from the stark clarity of her own resilience. She had walked through lies, knives, and threats. She had seen the truth in its rawest form and had survived. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel the weight of fear lift, if only slightly. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, but she ignored it. No more messages, no more alarms, no more strangers watching her every move. This was her moment of reclamation, small and quiet, yet infinitely powerful. She realized that the ghosts of this honeymoon, the red coats, the secret apartments, the threat of violence, would never leave completely. They would linger in the corners of her memory, shaping her, but no longer controlling her. Clara took a step closer to the water, toes brushing the edge of the dock. The harbor sparkled under the morning light, its vastness both humbling and reassuring. She imagined the city beyond the docks, full of ordinary lives continuing as if nothing had happened, and allowed herself the smallest trace of hope. A new chapter awaited her, one she could write on her own terms. Turning away from the harbor, she began walking toward the city streets. Each step was deliberate, heavy with the past yet lightened by the knowledge that survival had brought her strength. Sydney, which had once been a place of deception and danger, was now a backdrop for her rebirth. The honeymoon of lies had ended, replaced by a life she could finally reclaim. And as she moved forward, the ghosts followed silently, reminding her not of what she had lost, but of what she had endured and what she had survived.